Greetings, programs. Anybody here? All right, it's my first time actually doing any kind of live stream, and still learning how to use YouTube's live control room. Let's see if I can do this. All right, cool. All right. Nobody but me, no surprise. All right, so we'll record just for posterity. Here, I'm in the Unity game engine development system in the editor, and here I have a game board. We're working on a game called Nine Men's Morris. I already have a functional version of this game, including lights and boards and textures and play pieces and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to play it just for a minute. We'll do one run through and show you what it is that we're going to change and work on. I do have music in here. This is something I recorded from a band called Volgamit, so I'm not going to play a lot of this. We'll turn the music down. This canvas here has got a couple buttons on it. Big shout out to Brackies for the basic button know-how, and also for this great looking text. This is a free asset called Text Mesh Pro. So we're going to start our game here. Player 1, move a piece onto the board to any open dot. So I pick a dot and I move about here. Nice camera changes. The camera changes are being done by Cinemachine. Also a free asset that Unity just put out. Now the goal here is to get 3 in a row. If you get 3 in a row, that's a sub goal. If you get 3 in a row, you get to take a piece off of the board of your opponent. So he's going to put 2 on here, and black's going to say, no, you can't do that. And he's going to try and be a little bit more clever and put a piece up here. During this initial gameplay, you can either pick a piece first, or you can pick a dot first. Move the dot around, decide where you're going to go. I don't want him to have that intersection, so I'm going to take that intersection from him. Black's playing a little bit defensively here. I'm not a brilliant Nine Men's Morris player. I just thought it was an easy board game to learn on. So I'm going to block red, and then red's going to block black. And then black is going to try and do something fancy. I don't know what. Not much he can do at this point, actually. Try and put one here. Red's going to say, can't get 3 in a row anywhere, but I need to block anything he would try and do with this. So red goes here. And I'll play a little bit more randomly just to get pieces on the board. If you get 3 in a row, even during setup, I'm going to let red get 3 in a row right here. Black's going to go here. Red's going to get 3 in a row. Now, I get to capture a black piece. So black, I don't want black to have certain intersections here maybe. Alright, so I capture that piece, and black's going to say, no, kind of wanted that intersection. No, I'm just going to go down here. And then I get to take a red piece. So I'm going to take a piece that's blocking me. If I can. Can I do that? No, not really. Alright. I can only capture pieces not in a mill. So I can only capture pieces where there's not one part of 3 in a row. So I can't capture any of these 3, but I can capture anything else. Nothing else is 3 in a row. So we're going to move here. All right. Red, now having all his pieces on the board, moves his piece to an adjacent dot. Okay. So red is going to say, I'm going to prevent black from doing anything here. Black is going to go. If black moves up and then moves back, he'll create 3 in a row again, and there's nothing red can do to stop him, so that's a good move. That's perfectly valid. Now, red has to move. Red can move here, or red can move here, but those are the only 2 moves he has. So we're going to go here, because I don't want to unblock that corner. Black is going to move back. And so that piece is pointless because he's gone. So now it's red's turn again. Now red only has this move, or he can only move this piece. None of these other pieces, I got a piece that can move here. None of these other pieces can move. No green dots show up. So we only show you the adjacent moves. So let's move this piece here. Now if black was to come up and block him, black would win because then red wouldn't be able to move anywhere. Or if a player gets down to only 2 pieces on the board, then that opponent wins. Answering chat. There we go. Thanks for coming. My live chat widget is not showing up correctly in my stream, unfortunately. Something new I got to try and figure out. Nice to have you. Thanks, Sam. Nice to see anybody here. All right, back to gameplay. See if we can end this somewhat quickly. Black will move to here. Red will move to here. Black will create 3 and get rid of that piece. Red will try and make 3 here. Black. Red can't block him if he does that. Red goes to here. Moves the black piece. Black moves up so that he can move back later. Red does basically the same thing. Black moves back and takes that piece. Red moves up to here. Black can't block him because he can't move those. So move back. Red moves up and gets to take a black piece. Black moves down. Red moves over. Black moves here. Takes that red piece. Red's in a tough position now because he's got to try and block this where he really doesn't have any way to block it, and he doesn't have any way to get 3 in a row, really. So we have to move, 5 or 6 moves, and I think the game will be over by then. Normally you would have a concede button. That's one of the things I need to add, is being able to concede the game. So red's going to try and block that, but he really can't because this guy can go here. Red can go there. Black can go back. Take the red piece, and the game is over. Now I do have I bring the canvas back up. Now I changed this to restart game, and there's an internal variable that says we're restarting. Exit game, we'll do application exit, which doesn't work in the editor, but I can just stop it. So here we are. And so now I have a couple of things that I want to put on here. One is I have other pieces. So if we look in the prefabs, you can see I have something called a DCX model. Now the DCX, here let's just put one out here on the canvas. The DCX is an old model of a landing tester that was built, I think, in the 80s. And unfortunately the prototype was destroyed. But it's a really cool unit, and I have a UFO. So the UFO can and the DCX can play as pieces. So I want to be able to add those pieces in as an optional start Now, so I have to be able to then uh, change the prefabs here in which pieces can be started, and then I need a way for the player to pick. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here into the play control script, and we're going to make this an array of prefabs. So, Nine-Men's Morris, play control. So I have these are effectively my prefabs, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these an array, and I'm going to leave them player one piece because I need these to be I already have a plural in here. This is all the pieces that are currently in play. So when we instantiate a piece, we keep a list of those so that we can go do things with them and look at them and find out who's on the board and stuff like that. I'm also going to need, what was the other array that I needed? There's some other fancy things I can do, but really I just want to change the pieces for now. All right, so anytime I reference player piece, now I have to clear and destroy all the allocated pieces. Oh, that's the pieces arrays. Okay. Instantiate player one piece. All right. So I need to go and have a way to pick which index we are going to instantiate. All right. So which essentially which subscript in that. So let's go look at the startup canvas. Go to 2D mode, and let's zoom in here. So on the canvas, I need to be able to add a UI TextMesh Pro drop down. TextMesh Pro drop down? Sure. All right. TextMesh Pro drop down. Now, let's see. I haven't played with this before. Ah, option A. Let's see. Checkers. And I don't have any sprites for these. Checkers and spaceships. And let's get rid of option C. Can I get rid of that? Yes. Okay. So now, checkers is the default. And we're going to need a way to identify what are we asking the user to do. UI, TextMesh Pro, text. You know what? Instead of doing that, I'm going to clone this. Select pieces, and we're going to leave it in the same font and the same gradients and all that kind of stuff, and we're going to reduce this down to about 15. Yeah, that's better. All right. So we're going to call this drop down piece selection. So then on the play control, go back over to here. I need a way to pick that. So I'm going to need a TextMesh Pro drop down public variable so that I can go get, where's my other user interface stuff here? TextMesh Pro. Oh, that's certainly not what I want to do. TM Pro dot DM dropdown. Which means I probably don't need this, right? Right. If you select dropdown, yeah, right. And then we're going to make that an internal variable here just so I don't have to go grab that whole thing. And right here at the beginning, we're going to do drop down dot. It's not called index. What are you calling it? Piece selection. Probably value. Cool. All right. So now, which pieces? When I allocate I get player piece of which pieces? Right? Right. Okay, so that's for player 1. And here's for player 2. All right, let's go back over to play control. Now I have, what's it gonna tell me? Still an error over here. I go get the player tag names when I start. Player piece dot player enum. Because I keep the player name around so that I don't have to go find it. Ah, here it is, right there. See if that fixes my errors. Ah, all right. So save this, play control. Now, player pieces is an array. So the size is 2. And I have the player 1 checker, red checker. And player 1 gets to be the DCX. All right. Player 2 is also got 2 elements. And he gets the black checker. And he gets the UFO. All right. And because the DCX and the UFO already have the player piece script, it just handles that with different models. Same behaviors, different models. The checkers have halos, and the other models don't. And so in the player piece script, one of the things that I do in there is I say if, oh, and if it has particle systems, I stop and start the particle systems, and I turn the halos on and off if the halos exist. So if they don't exist, nothing happens. You just ignore them. All right, let's check this out. So now I can select different pieces. Cool. So the one thing is it already allocates the pieces before I get to pick. So that's something I need to change in the play control, because right now I do that in the start method. So really I need to do that later in play control. As soon as the player clicks the player start event. Right now all that does is kill the, let's see, what am I doing? Start canvas, start menu, start game button. Start game button. What does it do? Start canvas script. Oh, it already does this. All right, let's go open the start player script. I'm sorry, the start canvas script. Yes, fix line feeds. Thank you very much. So it calls hide canvas. So what it really needs to do is it needs to call play control allocate pieces. And then I need, or instantiate pieces. Let's call it instantiate pieces. Let's put that up closer to the start method. Doop, no. All right, instantiate pieces. I'm ready to go grab everything related to instantiating pieces. This just sets all the current play locations to not occupied. Save the player tags. We don't necessarily have that yet, so. And all the start locations and the piece counts. Those are all fine. Go down here and call this and go bang and go all. And then back up here we're going to call instantiate pieces after no. So the instantiate pieces doesn't show up until the start canvas, start game. If the game should be restarted, instantiate. Why doesn't it know that? And it says oh, I have to call that play control. Cool. That ought to fix that. Let's see here. It's one of the things I really like about this development environment. It reminds me a lot of older game or older machines where you could, you know, machines that had built-in BASIC and stuff like that, or you could just go in and write stuff. Not have to worry quite so much about all the low-level stuff that's going on. So if we start a piece with checkers, I have checkers. All right, let's try that with the other piece set. Spaceships. Spaceships, spaceships, spaceships. Uh-oh. Ow, ow, ow. Why is that? Oh, I grabbed the index too early in the play control script. Everyone goes first. Which pieces? Where's my which pieces assignment? Ah, defaulted to 0. Try it again. Pick the spaceships. Start with spaceships. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Piece select drop down. Oh yeah. Oops. Play control wants the drop down. Oh look, drop down. Piece selection drop down. It's the other thing I really do like about this environment, being able to do that stuff. It's really cool. Spaceships. Start the game. And now all the spaceships should fly over there. And aliens off to the air. There we go. Cool. All right. All right. All right. So now we got. Now we got spaceships and a player selection. So the other thing that I wanted to be able to do with the player selection was, let's go back to the 3D board game view. Let's go back to the board itself. All right, over here, let's go to ISO just because it's easier to look at. Okay, if I go to these curves, this is one of the things that I saw in a stream where Quill18 Creates channel. He was building the Royal Game of Ur, and he hard-coded up, sideways, and down movements in his how his pieces are moving, right? So these are Bezier curves. This is a free module that I found on the asset store, and they don't draw in game, but they do draw here in the editor. Okay, so the thing about this is the 0.0, if you can see it here, 0.0 and 0.1. There is a continuous curve here, and along the curve, the distance along the curve is 0 to 1. Okay, not 0.0, but if you start at location 0 along the curve, you start at 0.0. If you're at half, you're at halfway along the curve. If you're at 3/4, you're over here, and you're down to 0.1. So by following a curve, the pieces do that nice little hop, and they do a hop from side to side. So all the piece movement that you saw works by just following those curves. So let's go take a look at that, because I thought that this was a way more elegant solution than the hard-coded loops that Quill18 had used on that Royal Game of Ur. I'll put a link to that. He had a whole series of videos on that, and it was really actually pretty cool. And that's what prompted me to try a board game for my basically for my first Unity game. So here we are in the update method in the play control. And update method in the play control has control of the pieces. This is the thing that actually moves the pieces around. It does the game state transitions and all of that. So we have a couple of variables here that control where the piece is and which piece is moving. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up to where that is in the declarations. As soon as I find it. Okay, here's the move animation control variables. Stop it. There's a couple of Bezier curves. There's an on-off curve and a board-to-board move curve. Those are these. This is the on-off move curve, and this is the board-to-board curve, right? And then there's a move curve, and the move curve doesn't need to be public, but the move curve gets assigned to one of these two. We just copy it over to the move curve. That move is going to move along that curve over a span of a half a second. Is a piece moving? Is just a Boolean true false. Where are we along the curve, and which piece is moving? So then if we get back down to the update method, instantiate pieces. So here's the update method. If there's a piece moving, where are we moving to? Where are we moving from? Are we done yet? No. So the point along the curve is time.delta time divided by the move duration. So if we're moving for a half a second, we divide it out. If it's 2 seconds long, then we'll move smaller increments each time.delta time. If we get to the point along the curve where we're greater than or equal to 1, we're done. So then we make sure that the point is really moved to that location. All right. So to where is the move curve of the get point along that curve, and this in case it's 1.0. So this is all the stuff to stop the piece moving, turn off the halos, set all the control variables so that we're not going to move anymore. And after a piece is moved, that's when the game state transition happens. Either you have finished a move and you get to take a piece, or you've finished a move and you've taken a piece, or you've finished a move and you don't get to take a piece. But the game state transition handles that, what state you're in and what state you're going to, based on what's selected and things like that. But if you're not done, if the move curve isn't done, then you just get the next point along the curve, right? Because we already updated that here. Point along curve time plus equals time.delta time over move duration. We get the next point along the curve. That gives us a transform, a vector 3, and then we set the piece moving to move to that location. And that's in player piece, and that move to just sets the t-dot position. So there's a transform for it, and there's a vector 3 for it. So we just do set position and rotation t, which is where we are, and no rotation, so quaternion dot identity. So the move is really simple. You just move along that curve. But that means we can change the curves, right? So if we go back over here, I could have more than one curve. So I thought that the checker move was nice, but the spaceship move is too shallow. The spaceships should go higher. They should fly higher and go back down, right? So I'm going to rename this to checker move curve. And checkerboard to board move curve. And name's kind of long, but that's okay. That shouldn't break the link with the player control. No, it just renamed them. Okay, nice. So that is also going to become an array. And so then I'm going to duplicate these curves and make them taller. All right, so the checker, I'm going to call this the checker on-off move curve. And I'm going to duplicate that. So now it's called the you got it, spaceship on-off move curve. We're going to move those up to here, not in, but on. And then the checker board-to-board move curve, duplicate that, rename it to be spaceship. Okay. So for the spaceship curve, we're going to make him go higher. he's actually going to go up and back down. Now I want to make sure that he doesn't go forward or backward. I want this curve to be pretty much straight up and down. Make sure I didn't alter it. I did. All right, so we're looking at these in isomorphic mode. The spaceship move curve here. He's going to go, let's say, he's going to go a lot higher. Let's just make sure I didn't change him. I didn't. All right, so now I have two sets of curves, but I'm not referencing those curves yet. So let's go back over to here and go to the Bezier curve, and I'm going to need to make a move curve. He doesn't need to be an array anymore. Bezier curve, move curve, and this is going to be a Bezier, probably Bezier curve array. So then, where do I use it? AK of which pieces? Which pieces? Oh, come on. I really should just copy this, shouldn't I? All right. Board to board move curve. Okay. Back to the inspector. Back up to play control. Now, my Bezier curves need to be arrays. There we go. Board on-off move curve, size 2, and board to board move curve, size 2. So, the on-off move curve needs to be the checker on-off move curve. Oops. And the ship on-off move curve. And the board-to-board move curve needs to be the checkerboard move curve. And the spaceship board-to-board move curve. All right. Now the nice thing is, once I've got the arrays in here, I can extend this to any number of elements, and I just need to make sure that the drop-down and the so those move curves move a little fast. So what I'm going to do, I think the spaceships need to move slower. They probably need to start slower and end slower. They need to have a gradual curve. That'd be a real really kind of silly. But I have the move durations right here. So I'm going to say here the move durations equal 0.5 f comma 1 f. And I'm just going to default those, and then we can actually change that in the inspector, right? Let's get rid of the Bezier curves, the player pieces. So now the move durations, which is going to tell me it's got a problem here. Nope. Move durations of which pieces. That should be the only place that's used. Yep. All right, go back over here. All right, move durations are now, size is 2. Huh. So there must be something I don't understand about pre-allocating those variables in an array. I'll have to look that up. But doing it in here, that should work. Now the spaceships should slow down. They should fly half as fast along that curve. Pick the spaceships. Yep. Let's make them fly really far. Yeah, that looks a lot more fun. Now, there are particle systems on the DCX, but I think I'm not. You're just not seeing them. They're too small for one thing. I'm just placing pieces kind of at random here. But I like that. Okay, that's cool. So that was one of the things I needed to do tonight, is be able to have the player select, and theoretically, I could allow player A and player B to select their pieces independently. So it doesn't, like, everybody doesn't have to have the spaceships. You could play spaceships against checkers, and so the player should be able to pick UFOs or whatever. Just, yeah, whatever. So, no questions in chat. Let's double check the Twitter hashtag AskVax. Nope. Nope. All right, go back and look at the nothing in chat. I can't tell. Need to learn, understand total views, 2 peak concurrent. New subscriber, Samuel Price. Hey, cool. Thanks a lot, man. This is kind of my first foray into doing this, so that's kind of neat. Let's see. This is. Oh yeah. This is really the. It's really just on the panel, and this is not. This is the piece. Select label. Okay. Put him down here. Cool. All right. How are we doing? It is about 20 till. All right, so let's do a little walkthrough of this code. You guys have seen some of this code here now, but I really like the way this ended up getting structured, the way that the state machines are handled. So there's okay, let's look at the update method. So is the piece moving? Okay, we already looked at that. So if the canvas is active, then we don't want to do anything because the menu's still out there, right? So that's the start canvas. Don't worry about that. Then we look to see what happens with the mouse buttons. We look to see whether or not we've hit anything. If we hit something, then we go see what we hit. So we go to see if we hit a dot. We try and get a dot. See if we can do a hit collider, get component dot behavior. If we get a dot, then that becomes the current dot. If there's already a current dot, we turn its halo off and then make the current dot the one we just found and turn his halo on. If it's not a dot, then we see if it's player piece. So we get a player piece. We do the same kind of things. Set the current space, turn if the piece is on, clear the dot halos. We clear the adjacent moves list. So adjacent move list says what piece is allowed to move where. Or where's the current piece allowed to move. And we build that with a method further on. Oh, you can deselect the current piece, right? So if the piece is not the current piece becomes P. Otherwise, the current piece was P, so we set the current piece to null. You deselected him by clicking him again. And then we do the game action. Okay? So the game action will look at what's selected and what the game state is and allow you to then say whether or not what you've selected is valid. It'll tell you if it's valid or invalid, and it'll do an action, potentially do an action based on the current game state. So let's come down here and find the game state, or the game action method. Inform the player, show messages. Here's your game state transition, and game actions right below this. All right, so this is the act on the current game state, called whenever a dot or a piece is selected. All right, if it's state game over, turn all this stuff off and return. You don't get to do anything. If a piece is selected and that piece is captured, then you can't select a captured piece, turn it off, and tell the player you can't select a captured piece. This temp message is the one that fades. It's in my top left corner. Otherwise, and just return. You can't do that. Otherwise, check the game state. So either we're setting up a piece, we are capturing a piece, either during regular play or during the setup phase. Those behaviors are identical. Or we're moving a piece. And moving a piece is the board-to-board move. Okay. So let's run through these real quick. So if you're in the setup state, if the current piece has been selected, if the current piece is not null, this is the same as is not null, and the current piece's play index is not equal to no. No means I'm not currently on the play field. The play index is an index into the play locations array. So there's 24 play locations, and if you are trying to, if the play index is not no, then the piece is already on the board. You can't move pieces until all the pieces are on the board, right? We already checked for whether he was captured. If the play index is no and he's not captured, then he's in his start location and you can move him onto the board. Okay, so the next check is if you tried to select the opponent's piece. So if the current piece is not null and the current piece's owner is not the current player, then you must select your own piece to place it on the board. Invalidate the piece, make the piece null, right? Same thing. So if you have a piece selected and you have a dot selected, then the move curve is the on-off board move curve. Move the piece to the board, and then set the current piece to null and the current dot to null. Move piece to board, which we should probably go to next, but move piece to board effectively makes a copy of the current piece, and that's the piece moving. Move, one of the move variables. So then it sets up those things, and then the update method just moves those things around. Okay, so if you're capturing, if you selected a dot, you can't select a dot. You have to select one of the other player's pieces. If the current piece is owned by the current player, you have to select one of the other player's pieces to capture, not your piece. Otherwise, you can only capture a piece that's in a mill if no other pieces are not in a mill. So you can only capture a piece in a mill if there's not something else to capture. Right? So if the count of the pieces of the opponent player that are not in a mill is greater than 0, and the current piece that you tried to select is in a mill, is one of the opponent's mills, then you have to say you can only capture pieces that are not in a mill at this time. Otherwise, either these conditions weren't met or they don't matter or whatever, and then you capture that piece. So the thing about the difference between capture piece, right, and move piece to board, really the only difference there is the animation. The Bezier curve ends are selected the opposite. So if you're moving the piece onto the board, 0, we move the curves around, right? So we move the 0 point of the curve. If you're moving onto the board, the 0 point of the curve is moved to where the current piece's location is, and the end point is moved to the dot's location. If you're capturing a piece, then the point 0 is moved to the piece's current location, and the point 1, the end of the curve, is moved to the capture location for that piece. Every piece has a start location and a capture location. There's grids of, go back over here. There are 2D mode, back to the board. All right, so here's all the dot locations, okay? Here are the player 1 start locations, and there's a bunch of them, but they don't all show up. So they're just transforms. They're just locations, right? And then player 2, oh, the player 1, here's the player 1's captured positions are over here. The player 2 starts are on the other side of the board, and the player 2 captions are out here. So I just have transforms for all those things just so I can move to them. And then I did have to drag all of those into the arrays of start locations, play locations, and captured locations. It's called 9 minutes Morse because there's 9 pieces, so there's 9 elements in the array there. Anyhow, so we move the curves around and process along the curve. If we're just moving a piece, regular move piece means the board-to-board move. If you select your own piece, okay, if the piece and a dot's not selected, then we clear the adjacent move list the adjacent moves for the current piece, and halo all the adjacent moves for the current piece. So that allows me to say, oh, here's all the places you can move for that piece. So then if the piece is not current, but the dot's current, you have to select a piece first so we can show you the adjacent legal moves. If they're both selected, you can only move if the dot is in the adjacent moves list. All right. So if the adjacent moves lists find the index for I is I equals the current dot's play index. If t is not equal to no, knows the -1 list, then we move the piece to the board. Otherwise, you must select a dot next to the piece you want to move. So no here is -1. I just basically made a constant integer at the top of this so that the -1, which is what adjacent, that's what the find index will give you. It'll give you -1 if it doesn't find what you've asked it to go find, the current play index in this case. Okay, so you can only move 2 during regular moves. You can only move 2 an adjacent location. Right. So then let's go back up and look at the game transition. So this is all, what state am I in? What just happened? What state do I go to? Right? So if you're doing setup, you might have created a new mill. If the player created a new mill, then we say you get to capture. We inform the player and we change the game state to set up capture opponent. Otherwise, if both of the player pieces at start count are now 0, we look to see if there are any possible moves. If both the players have no possible moves, or if either player has no possible moves, then the game is over. And we increment which player wins. We figure out which player can win. Otherwise, we just go to regular move piece because the number of pieces at start is 0. Otherwise, there's no change. We just toggle the player and keep setting up pieces. We stay in the game state of setup place piece. If we go to setup capture opponent, then you get to capture the opponent. If the pieces at the start are 0 and the pieces are 0, then we double check to see whether or not the game is over already. Pieces is less than or equal to 2. This check should really be included up here. Can I just copy that? Yes, I can. Ah, good. Okay. Otherwise, you just, from capture, you can go to either game over, regular move piece, or set up place piece, because you're still setting up. If you're moving a piece, then possible moves opposition player. Okay. So the only way that you can win out of just moving a piece is if you block the other player's moves. So if you block his moves, then the game can go to game over. Otherwise, you stay in. If you created a new mill, then you go to capture. Otherwise, you just toggle the player, and the regular move piece game state stays in effect, and the other player gets to move a piece. So if you're capturing, this is after. So this game state transition is called after the piece has been moved. When the update piece moving portion of the piece moving of the update method finishes. So then we can either go to game over or we go back to regular move piece and we toggle the player. And we return to game state as a courtesy. I don't actually ever use this anywhere. So dividing out the game action of actually moving the piece and the game state transition, which allows for what states go to what and under what conditions, ended up being pretty clean. I'm pretty happy with the way that this works, and I could use this for a lot of different board games. I could use this for checkers. I could use it for I don't know, anything that involves moving pieces on and off a board. This would be very clean. You'd have different states, of course, for the different games. Game action. Okay. Anything else I want to look at? This just counts how many pieces are currently at the start positions. This counts the current number of possible moves for that player. It just goes through all the pieces that are currently there, all the play indexes in the play locations that are occupied by the current player, and looks at all the possible moves for all the adjacent moves for each of those pieces, for each of those locations, and if the index on no and the thing is occupied is no player, so it's not occupied, then you count increments for that's a possible move he could move to. The opponent just toggles player 1, player 2, and piece in a mill is interesting because you have to go through all the possible mills, and the result starts out as false. And if the result ever goes to true, you break out of this for loop, and you break out of this for loop, and you return the result. So as long as the result stays false, I'm looking through things. But as soon as I find that there's any piece in a mill, which is what I care about here, break out of all these loops without doing a break. Okay, effectively you go back up to the top of the loop and it says, oh, result's now true, bust out of that. Oh, it comes back up to the top of this. Oh, result's now true, bust out of that, return result. So this is a very clean way to do multi-layer indexing like this without throwing breaks in it, and it leads to a very clean flow control inside of a function. This returns true false. Okay, so this selected area here, mills of mill comma dot is equal to the play index. If this location and this mill is owned by the current player, if the mill is owned by the player, then for all the mills in here, if that's the current play index, if that's the current location, then that piece is in a mill. That's true. We're done. I just need to know whether the piece is in a mill or not. So I have to look through all the mills and see whether or not the current location is in any of those mills. If it is, then I say, yeah, that's true. The piece is in a mill. And so at that point, you might have to tell the player you can't take that piece, right? So how many pieces on the board does it have in mills? Here's all the counts. It's the same. It's a similar kind of a loop. You go through all the player pieces, and if that piece is in a mill, then you increment the count. So I use this in more than one place. And this is the reverse. How many pieces are not in a mill? And this just says if it's the piece is not in a mill, the exclamation point is the negation of that. So if it's not in a mill, then you increment the count. These are just callbacks for the canvas 2D. So these are callbacks for not that canvas. I'm sorry, the in-game canvas, which is up here. Okay, fine. So these sliders. have callbacks on the play control set music volume and play control set sound effect volume. So there is sound effects. I don't know if you could hear it or not while I was playing, but the checkers do have lift and drop sound effects. And one of the other things I want to add to this eventually is to be able to, let's see what time it is. Oh, it's 6 o'clock, so we're almost done here. Only audio on the left ear. That, 2584, hey, thanks. I'm sorry if I missed that earlier. That is due to the way, yep. That's the way my audio system is built. I'm actually in a recording studio, and yeah, that's true. This microphone is only plugged into the left channel. I'll have to go grab this this video later and re-edit it and re-upload it with monophonic audio. Hey, thanks for that note. I'll fix it in post. All right. So one of the things I want to be able to do is on the sound effects, which if I look in my music and sounds folder, I have a piece drop and a piece slide. Piece drop is just a little click, and piece slide is, yeah. So I just did those by taking a piece of plastic and sliding it around my laptop. I got a recording studio, but I didn't get up here. So what I want to do is, rather than making it the same every time, I want to be able to have the piece drops sound different. So I'll make an array of a couple of them, and then I'll let the piece drop audio player in the piece control, I'll actually have it play piece. I'll have an array of those things, and I'll just let it pick randomly. So right now it plays a single clip, and I'll just have an array of clips, and I'll pick one at random, and I'll play a piece drop randomized clip. And I'll need those for each of the different each of the different kinds of pieces. So I'll need a set of checkers pieces and a set of spaceship pieces. So that's cool. All right. So we've looked at quite a bit of code here. This is like, this is kind of long. One of the guys that I really love his tutorials is Bracky's. If you guys want to get into doing stuff, he makes pretty short little videos, but he's all about, man, making these modules just really, really super short and making a new module behavior for absolutely everything. This is a bit of a code-heavy game in terms of just how simple the gameplay is, but because I needed the logic of the gameplay to be kind of sophisticated and know whether or not the actions are going to go and stuff like that, how the transitions are going to happen, it was a little bit longer than it should be. So one little final note here on this board layout. So I have an array from 0 to 23, a 24 element board array, and those are over in play control. So if we look over here at the play locations, these are all the, come on, there we go. So there's 24 play locations, and I numbered the dots 0 to 23. If we go back over to the board, and not in 3D. So here's the 24 play locations, and the lines and the dots. The dots are they're just spheres, but I found this cute little behavior to let me draw a gizmo on them, so I could look at them easier. But they're just a squashed sphere in Unity. They are literally just what's their scale? How did I scale them down? I forget. I'd have to go look. Oh, they're a prefab. Duh. I knew that. So if I look at the dot, how is the dot prefab? I don't remember. It's just a squash sphere. And so and the lines are the same thing. The lines are just they're just cubes. Actually, they're just flat cubes. 0.005 by 0.1 by effectively by 1. Um, so I just scaled those and then basically hid the ends of the lines with the dots. It makes that way I didn't have to draw the board. I could have just drawn this board in graphics and then um, you know, put transforms at all those locations instead. But this was a real easy way to draw the board, and I could do it all in Unity. It's maybe a little bit heavier, but this game is so small. It's maybe a little bit more graphics intensive than it would have to be, but nobody's ever going to care or know or care on this. And the board is just a box too. And then there's a plane out here. That plane is just this ground to play. And these textures are something I generated in a freeware ray tracing program called PavRay. Right. So there's a wood grain. There's a kind of a stone grain, and I just layered those on those things. So there you can see if I highlight the board, it shows you all the lines. So anyway, there's a variation. There's a variation of this game that allows the diagonals, right? So I would have one of the things I'll add to this before I put it out there is I'll make a diagonal line here that's part of the board, and then I can hide that if you select that the diagonal option is not being used. But then I also have to change the adjacent, all the adjacent arrays, because then this dot would have not only these two as adjacents, but then it would have these two as adjacents. It would have this guy, and it would have this guy. So they would all those adjacents. If I can select that dot, yeah. So there would be 4 elements to that, not just 2. So the adjacent play indexes array maybe would have to be altered as well. Although that's just an array, and that's one of the reasons I did this the way I did it. You'd have to add new mills, so the mills are all just listed as play indexes. And here's all the adjacent moves. So for every point, here 1 and 2 and 3, and there's no 4th one, right? So those corners are one, like the outside points are 1 and 2. If you come up here and look, so there's 1 and 2 zeros in the middle. So they would have another index, right? So 1 would get an index of 4 added to it, so it would be 0, 10, and 4. And I'd have to go through and have essentially 2 different sets of adjacent moves, another array element, or a second adjacent moves array, one that included the diagonals, and then you'd have to have some logic to say, oh, am I using the adjacent moves or the adjacent moves with the diagonals? Yeah. So that would all be in there. But this is all just Unity elements. I like the way that works. I like the way they allow you to do that kind of stuff. When I first started this out, I had to redefine this silly thing, this 24 element array. Man, I had to redo this thing about 10 times. It was really annoying. But I'm learning. I picked a board game to learn on to start with, and I'm adding some bells and whistles now. I love the Bezier curve solution that was way more elegant than the hard-coded movement stuff that Quill 18 Creates had done, although the rest of his gameplay and the idea of actually not using the physics, so there's no physics in here really. The pieces they just follow those curves, and I place them exactly where I want them. Nothing here is dropped, you know, using gravity or anything like that. The pieces just move along the curves, and they're placed at places. I don't need physics in here. It was way more complicated than it needs to be. It was one of the things that that he did in his Royal Game of Ur. So go watch the Royal Game of Ur thing if you haven't. It's probably about 6 videos. I think the last one was kind of long. He did that as a live stream, about an hour and a half. So but most of them are 20, 30 minutes or something like that. And as I said, Brackeys has been a huge help. The whole thing of how to use canvases, the Cinemachine, which I didn't really even talk about here. The cameras here are Cinemachine cameras. So the player 1 camera is up here, and the player 2 camera is over here, and they're both Cinemachine virtual cameras. And to toggle between them, I don't know if you saw in the toggle player. In the toggle player, oh, there's a player 2 camera, player 1 camera. All right, let's go see player 2 camera. Oh, I need to change it in a couple places. All you have to do is to change to the player 1 camera, enable player 1 camera, and disable the player 2 camera. And say opposite for, you know, enable 2 and disable 1. And Cinemachine will automatically swoop between the two, and you can change the transition times and all that in the Cinemachine engine. Is that in main camera? Yeah, the Cinemachine brain script. So you can change all that in here. Ease in and out, half second. So I could make that faster or slower just by changing this. Cinemachine has made that just so easy. It allows you to focus on things and solo the cameras and see what they look like in game view. The dead zones around the cameras and all that kind of stuff. This gray and purple is all related to Cinemachine, and that yellow square is the center of where you're looking. And if I change from one to the other, solo that camera, player 2, that's player 2's position, and that's player 1's position. Yeah, okay. And then it shows you, so you can make sure that the entire view of the game that you want to see on screen is in because it's not in the it's not outside the dead zone, and where the hot spots are and stuff like that. So we've run this game. I've built it for iOS, and we've run it on an iPad. And by making these things smart and making sure that you can see what's where, it actually works in both landscape and portrait. So Cinemachine handles all that for you. It's just brilliant. So TextMesh Pro and Cinemachine and Bezier Curve are really the only three things that I'm using here, assets that I'm using. Everything else I built. The checker pieces I built, they were built with 123D Design. They're a real, I don't know if I can see. Yeah. So if you look over here, they have nice ridges around them, and they're a nice little the nice little checker piece. And they're just shaded red and black here. The DCX model is got little rocket motors under it, and I do have particle systems. I haven't quite gotten that working right yet, but there's actually 4 particle systems attached to this sub prefab, and then the top level prefab has that on it. So calls the other one just to keep it clean. So there's your little DCX model. Again, I made this in 123D Design. Exported the STL, sucked that into Blender, and exported the FBX out of Blender and then back into Unity. I made these really pretty quick. Here's my UFO. He's kind of cute. He's got little bumps on him. So I should make him animate. I should make him rotate as he flies. One of those. I haven't done any animations really in this yet. I'm just following Bezier curves. All right, I think that's going to do it. This is thanks for the couple of people who joined live. It's 6:15. This has been an hour and a quarter. We're going to call it quits here. And I hope you learned something. If you have any other questions, post a comment to the video, and I will be absolutely happy to answer any questions I can. I'm not a genius Unity developer yet, but I'm trying to get there with the behaviors and events and how to attach classes to pieces and provide the methods for those. So thanks a lot. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.